Hey, excuse me. That's a good time to get something stuck in your throat. Hey, happy Saturday. I see Zach's in the chat room. Hey, Zach. Don't know who else is in right now, but if you're lurking, welcome. So, it's been a busy week for me. Lots of work stuff to do. I said it on stream a couple times. I work in math education. I was leading some teacher workshops this week for a local school district. So I was doing some crazy last minute planning for that early in the week, and then had a couple days of workshops. And then some of the curriculum that I work on, we have printing deadline at the end of this month for the new edition. So I've been madly doing edits and rewrites for some parts of that too. So it's been a busy week. I have not gotten all that much done hobby-wise the last few weeks for a variety. Oh man, should have got all this out of my system. Haven't got a lot of hobby done. You know, a few things happen right when I finish a big project. Like I sent off the Atlantis Miniatures Dwarves. You know, my brain always wants a little bit of a mental break from stuff. So I took a little time off of hobbying, and then had some work travel and things like that. But I've managed to assemble a couple of my next projects. The other thing too that's weird, so I don't know how many of you who watch this do commission painting. I know Zach does, and I'm sure he experiences this all the time. You know, you get contacted all the time by people who want you to paint something for them. And usually the way it goes is the first step is you kind of figure out the project, you figure out if you are even interested in doing it, and if you are, you kind of give the person a price. At that point, some people just say, no, sorry, see ya, because they don't want to pay that much. And even if you get past that stage, you'll get a lot of people who say, yes, I like this. This is great. You're like, okay, here's the address. Send me the model. And then you actually have to have them send you the model. So I've had, so in addition to what I'm going to show you here, I'm supposed to be painting 3 single one-off miniatures for people. None of those people, even though the things were agreed to like 3 or 4 weeks ago, none of those people have sent me models yet. So I have no idea if I'm actually going to do those projects or not. One of them is the Star Wars, I always forget the name, Imperial Assault or whatever, the one kind of board game / RPG one, the one of the Jedi. Another one is supposed to be the Blind Water pinup model from Privateer Press, where she's kind of dressed in alligator skins. And then the third model is supposed to be a special edition Privateer Press model of the Ashland, where she's got flames all around her and flame wings and things. Who knows? I may or may not be painting those in the future, so keep an eye out. Keep you on the edge of your seat in the suspense. What I am working on, I was working on assembling this guy, doing some last minute touches, doing his base and stuff last week. So I didn't get too much farther this week other than just getting them, you know, all the assembly finally finished, and got everything primed. So the way that the client wants this is he wants this Marine to be stepping out, emerging from the Dreadnought. He's got an idea. He's going to have 3 of these Redemptor Dreadnoughts in his army, and he wants all of them to be piloted and in different ways. So he's got one conversion he did himself where he's got instead of feet, the Dreadnought has sort of wheels. So it's almost like a Segway Dreadnought. He kind of like skates on his feet, and then he's got a guy who's piloted, like sitting forward, almost like he's riding a motorcycle, kind of piloting the Dreadnought. So that's kind of cool. I don't know what he's going to do for the third one, but he wants this one to be a centerpiece for that. And we'll get back to this in a second, but I'll show you. He sent me the pictures of the Lannister armor from Game of Thrones, and this is kind of the scheme he's looking for, with lots of lion emblems and then this kind of color scheme, where in this picture you see the black and the brass and the red. There's also, if you kind of zoom out and also see variations of this, there's like a dark red-brown color. So I'm going to try to incorporate those 4 main colors in in it. Yeah, Zach said, those commission complications are the truth, really considering if I want to keep that up. I think that maybe 20 times in my life, I've said, I'm done with commissions. I'm never painting for other people again. I'm just painting for myself. And make that decision, and I'm really firm, and I'm happy with it. And then like a week or two goes by, and somebody emails me or messages me and says, I want to give you money to do your hobby. And then I do another commission. So, the thing that I would just say, Zach, is, don't completely shut off with it, but, just be, I think you'll be happier if you start being very discerning with who you work with and what projects you take, and make sure it's just something you're going to love to do as like even a starting point. I've just started saying no to lots of commissions just right off the bat. They'll send me a request and they'll say, these are the models I want. And I'll just be like, I'm really not interested in painting those models. I found it a lot easier over time to start saying no to those things. And then I feel much happier when I say yes to the projects that I really do want to do. And then what I'm comfortable with is just painting my own stuff. So if I don't have any commissions on my plate, then I just paint something I want to paint. And then for about half the time, I've ended up having somebody who just wants to buy that model off of me as I'm working on it. So that's been fun too. So I'm working on this Redemptor Dreadnought in the Lannister color scheme. The other project that's coming up soon, I've shown these off several times. I've got them all assembled. So these are the Celtic busts that are available on my website. You can see it there on my screen, GorillaWithABrush.com. So you can purchase these from my website. I'm going to be doing a paint along with these starting in a few weeks. So go through, basically paint them exactly how I would paint them. I'm going to show you every step, encourage you to paint along with me. All of the videos will stream live here on Twitch. They will be archived to my YouTube site, so you can go back and rewatch them again and again. I have 2 copies of each bust that are all assembled and primed, and I'm kind of debating what I'm going to do with the duplicate copies. So I will either just paint one of each of these up on stream and say this is exactly how I would paint them, and then afterwards just kind of paint up a couple other and slightly different. Like maybe if you've seen the movie, they have like blue face paint on in some of the war scenes. So maybe do one copy with the war paint, one copy without. Another option would be on stream to kind of say, okay, well, we're painting the Hamish bust, and here's how I would paint them, just kind of go nuts completely as far as I would go with them, and then paint one that's like at a more entry level skill level where I show you some things that you can do to kind of bridge the gap between the two. So maybe you don't feel like, even with me showing every step, like you're just a little intimidated by trying to do some of the things that I'm doing. Maybe then I can show you also like, here's kind of like a step down from that, but will also look good, and here's what I suggest. Almost like if you watch exercise videos, sometimes they have the guy off to the side who's doing the lower impact version. So I could do something like that. If you have preferences, send me a message. If you have any ideas, I'm still kind of brainstorming exactly what I want to do with the 2 copies of each bust. But in the meantime, if you do want to participate in this, please go visit my website, purchase a couple of these. I did lower the price recently to help make it easier for people to get in on this paint along. Again, I say this all the time, but I do a lot of content for free. I'm always very accessible to people who are on Twitter. I don't put my stuff behind a paywall. If you want to support me, throw me a little bit of money. Buying these busts is one way you can do that. It was kind of a big investment to get these casts, so getting some of that investment and getting a little bit of extra on top of that would be really helpful to me. So I would appreciate that. But also, like with all of the other things I do when I take money for any of my hobby projects, I always take 25% of what I get and I give it to charity. So you would also be supporting a good cause as well. So that's my big sales pitch. Here's a second sales pitch. So if you've been following me on social media, you know that I'm working with Grayed Out Productions right now to get some dice bags made with my gorilla on there. I think this is really cool. It's just kind of something he pitched one day. He's like, hey, a dice bag with your Gorilla logo would look really good. And I was like, actually that would be kind of cool. So at first I just was talking to him about getting it done and what the logistics of it would be. Then I decided to do this also just as a charity thing. So I paid up front to have, it depends on how the fabric gets cut. There's either going to be 7 or 8 bags for sure. And so 7 or 8 bags are being made. This is the prototype that I'm showing you on screen right now. This dice bag, he made it with the 5 pockets inside. So if you go to his site, I think it's Grayed Out Productions, but if you just Google that, you'll get to his site. So his dice bags, you can see examples with the pockets inside. So it's kind of cool because you can use these bags. You can either sort dice. So let's say you've got your big pack of D6s that you use for playing Warhammer, but then maybe you also have your set of D&D dice that are separate. So you can use the little pockets to kind of sort your dice in there. You could also put tokens in the little pockets inside and then all your dice in the middle. If you're going to RPG night, you could put your dice in the pockets. You could throw your mini in the main pocket, kind of separate it from the dice so the dice aren't chipping your paint or anything. And you can just, carry your bag, little bag with you to RPG night. So the prices of these, essentially what I'm doing is I'm starting off the price at what I paid for them. So between getting the fabric printed and all of that stuff, so they're about $25 a bag. So I'm selling them for $25 a bag. However, if you want to buy one and you want to pay more than $25, anything in excess will also go to charity. So 100% of what you pay minus any of the shipping costs I send to you. So if you want to cover my shipping, again, more money will go to charity. But let's say you just give me $40, then I'll subtract a couple dollars off for the shipping, and then like $38 or whatever ends up being will completely get donated to charity. So 100% of what I get from this donated to charity. This is just a way for me to kind of give back and give people something cool to have as well. So 2 of these have already been purchased. So there will be about 5 or 6 more. If it ends up being a hugely popular thing, maybe I'll do a second run. But for right now, if you want to get in, there's not too many left. Like I said, there's only 4 or 5 or 6, somewhere around there of these that are going to be left. I have a couple people who said they were interested but haven't firmly committed yet. So I might have as many as 4 of these already accounted for. So they're going fast. So if you want in on this, please message me on Twitter, Facebook, send me an email. Go to my website and fill out one of the online forms. Any of those would be, because you can do that through my website. Any of those ways would be really great. All right, I've been talking way too much. Let's get to some painting. All right, so the first thing I was thinking of doing, so I'm a little torn about where to start. So I've been kind of printing off some various ideas for freehand designs that I can paint on some of this armor to try to, and on the Dreadnought too. I kind of like these profile simple silhouettes. I think those are really cool. So some different ideas. I'm not quite sure. What I'd like to do, or what I'm thinking about potentially doing, is having these 2 chest plates be like a split lion face. So the one side of the lion face is here, this other side of the lion face is here, and so you're kind of looking at it, and you've got the split lion face across his chest armor there. Then do some, some lion freehand stuff on each of the shoulders, and then kind of do borders that are similar to the picture that you see there. Have kind of a border in the bronze and have some little decorative elements in there, some filigree and different things like that. So those are, I'm still toying around with exactly what I'm going to do with that freehand wise. I think what I'm going to do is, because this guy, I won't have to do any freehand. The customer sent me some third-party shoulder pads that are lion heads. So this guy's not going to have any necessarily freehand lion designs on him, but what I will do is do lots of little trim, and again, something sort of like what you see on the armor that's on the screen. Kind of trim everything out with gold details, gold plating, whatever that color is. Have some of the bright red kind of in his center, some of the key parts. Find some places I'm going to do the more burgundy, wine red. So what I'm going to start off doing is just kind of blocking out where I think I want these colors, settling on that, and then start getting into more of the detail work. Start shading and highlighting some of the colors, and then go in and do other stuff. We'll see how far we get today. This is my big project I'm trying to work on right now, so there'll be a lot of work in between streams. If it makes sense in terms of my wife letting me stream more often in the next couple weeks to show more of this project, I'll try to get some more streams. I just always feel bad because, a lot of the times, I paint out here in the main room of our house just so when I'm doing this, I'm not blocked away back in a corner. 'Cause I work from home, so I'm back in my home most days. I work back in my office in the back corner of the house, and so that would be the only really logical place to have a permanent painting area, but that just means I spend my entire life in one room of the house and I don't really see my wife and stuff. So I paint out here in the main area, but that also means that, if she wants to watch TV or if she wants to be out here, then I can't really stream, or she feels like, anyway. So if it makes sense, I'll try to stream a little bit more often. In part because I think the client would like to see a little bit more of the process so he can decide what he wants to do for himself when he paints the rest of his army. He's kind of waiting a little bit to see what I do with these models. No pressure or anything, just establish an entire paint scheme for a new army. All right, let's get to it. I'm also still trying to decide what day the paint along should be. I've been streaming a lot on Sundays, which seems to work for some people, but other people, I had several people buy the busts who live out of the country, so the Sunday afternoons is kind of tough for them. They can always catch the replay, but they can't ask any questions live. So earlier in the day would be better. It's harder to do earlier in the day on Sunday because I go rock climbing on Sunday mornings. Saturdays are usually okay for me, but I'm not sure. It doesn't seem like that I have as many people here today as normal. So we'll see. We'll have to work out exactly what time's going to work best for everybody to be able to catch those live. All right, so I think I'm going to use, I'm just testing out a couple little colors on my paper towel here, figuring out what I want to use as the base color for the areas that are going to be kind of a wine color. I think I'm going to use P3 Sanguine Base. It's kind of a reddish brown. And I'm going to do the gold stuff last because some of that's going to go on top of other colors. So I'm going to block out the other three colors first. The more red areas, I use deep red. So Zach, are you painting right now? What are you working on? I need to make sure I remember what colors I used. I guess they'll be on the video if I ever need to go back and look at them again. All right, so I'm gonna have trying to use the bright red, or what will be the bright red, a little sparingly on the model. It's when you look at the Lannister armor, like the red is prominent in the sense that it just kind of pops out at you because it's the brightest color on the armor, but it's really not used in very many places on the armor. Usually it's kind of along the chest plate and then the shoulders. The one that I have up on screen right now is Joffrey's armor, which has a little bit more black than some of the other armor designs. So a couple days ago, my wife and I started watching Barry, which is a new series on HBO. It's pretty good. It's got Bill Hader as the main character, and I guess he's one of the writers and creators of it too. The basic premise is this guy is he's an assassin. But one of the jobs that he does is he has to kill this guy. He ends up stumbling upon an acting class in session in Los Angeles. And he thinks that maybe his life purpose is to become an actor, but he's really not he has no kind of innate talent or skill for it at the moment. And so it's him sort of sorting all of that out. Meanwhile, all the interesting situations he's getting into as being a hired killer as well. It's pretty entertaining. Also, I mentioned it last week, and I tweeted out for my Follow Friday this week too, but I've been listening to a lot of episodes of this podcast called Experience Pointers. And it's really good. If you're into RPGs, especially if you're a GM or you're an aspiring GM, or you just want to understand better what GMs do as they work in the games and kind of just get more of a sense of all the intricacies of that role. Really, really good podcast. I also published one of my written tutorials for painting some of the dwarves from Atlantis Miniatures, the scribe model. So the full tutorial is up on my website. If you go to GorillaWithABrush.com, there's the blog section. It's split into two parts. The first part is just all the basic terminology and paint consistency and all of that kind of stuff that goes into it. And then the second one is actually just painting the scribe. I'm working on the second one right now, which is the Troll Slayer. And I did some of her on the stream if you were watching a few weeks ago. But I'm doing the written thing for her. And the PDF will probably be available for download at some point from somewhere. If you really are desperate to get your hands on the PDF, if you message me, I'll probably send it to you. The first part of the Troll Slayer, then PDF will be the same because it's going to have all the same stuff with the consistency, which is why on my blog I split them into two blog posts. And then for blog-wise, you just read that first introductory thing, and then you can just look at how to paint the actual models themselves. PDF version will have the intro on both of them. I'm passing those along to Atlantis Miniatures as well. I don't know what they're going to do with them. They're going to make a blog on their website or send the PDF to people who backed the Dwarf Kickstarter. I don't know. Speaking of, as well, as I mentioned earlier, commission stuff is always kind of, well, I'll believe it when I see the money and when I see the model show up. But Atlantis Miniatures is talking about having me paint their entire dwarf line. He was so happy with the work that I did. So once I'm done with these projects that are in front of me right now, I'll be back to painting dwarves, and I might be painting dwarves for quite a while. So I hope you like the dwarves, because you're going to see a whole lot more of them. Now what's neat is some of the models that I'm going to be doing coming up are like a warrior riding a saber-toothed tiger. There's a elephant that has I'm blanking on the word, but the thing that's on top of it that then the king and queen can ride on. There are like these giant war hogs that there's riders on. There's goats that people are riding on. Just all sorts of really interesting, cool models. So it's not just going to be entirely just like more warrior models. There'll be some other really cool stuff that's in there as well. Who says they haven't, Zach? Let's just say that I will not be, if I do paint some of the mythical monsters, their mythology line, I will not be the sole painter. My understanding is that he wants the entire dwarf line. I'm trying to get a little more light on this guy. He wants me to do the whole dwarf line so that it's uniform, but I think that the mythology line he might be getting more people because a lot of the models are much, much larger. So one thing, it's kind of funny in talking to him, I think he underestimated how much he was going to enjoy having the painted models once he started getting mine in the mail. So then one of the first things he said was, "Man, I really wish that you hadn't sold your Etten," which is a funny comment because he helped me to sell it. He was advertising for me, but I think at the time he wasn't necessarily thinking about wanting to have lots of painted versions of his models to have at conventions and things like that. He was just more caring about having pictures of models like for his website. So now he's sort of kicking himself that he didn't buy the Etten. So my response to that was, well, you know, in your new your mythology range, you've got a giant, what's it called? A Cyclops. It's about the same size. And, you know, if you want a giant, awesome guy tattooed to the hilt, you know, I'd paint that guy for you. So we'll see what all happens. I think a lot of it's going to come down to what he prioritizes. One of the things he started to think about now is the benefit when you're at a convention of not just having, you know, awesomely painted models, but having larger models that attract people who are just walking by to want to poke their head in. So, for example, you know, the little dwarves I painted, they aren't going to attract anybody into the booth themselves. They're too small. People aren't going to see them from just walking around, and unless they know they're there, or he's got some like blown up version of them on a poster or something. Once they get in there, they'll see them and they'll be impressed, and maybe it'll help sell dwarves. But he also needs some of his larger monster kits painted. Things that people can see from further away, and it draws them into the booth. I don't know what he's going to prioritize. Hey, Ghost Section 9, what's up? Cool, not bright, sunshiny silver armor. Are you seeing a lot of that around lately? Yeah. This is definitely going to be a more muted scheme. You can kind of see the armor that's up on the screen. We're going. This is for a client. He wants the kind of Lannister armor color scheme. So right now I'm just blocking out the different colors. So yeah, it's going to be 4 different colors. Basically, it's going to be black, the kind of semi-saturated red you see there, like a wine burgundy color, and then the sort of brassy, bronzy yellow accents. Tons of freehand on here. Do cool little filigree and things like that. The client is having this guy being emerging from the inside of this Redemptor Dreadnought. So then the Redemptor Dreadnought's going to have the same color scheme, tons of freehand on it. Just kind of testing out all the colors and playing with them on the pilot. If I mess something up and have to redo it or rethink the colors, it's a lot easier to repaint on a little guy. Do every Marine. Yeah, we had joked with Zach, who's actually in the Greek themed tattoos. Yeah, that'd be really cool. Yeah, that'd be really cool. Zach, who's in the chat right now, Blues Light Painting, was the one we were giving him a hard time about that. That he couldn't think of. He was having trouble deciding what Space Marine chapter to be working on. And we were joking he can think about it like Voltron or something, where the various aspects of the Space Marines have united to create the perfect warrior. So there'd be like Space Wolf arm with a chain sword to capture their brutality, and he'd have, I don't know, some kind of plasma pistol right hand from or Melta arm or something from the Salamanders, and a jump pack from the Death Guard, and I don't know, legs of a scout, something like that. make him look like he was assembled from a bunch of other things. I did do a Inquisitor one time. This was back a little before my freehand skills were quite as good. So it was okay. The Inquisition symbol turned out pretty well, but the little chapter symbols weren't all that fantastic. But I had this idea that this guy, he was the brother captain in the big Terminator armor, and he had the power sword. If you remember that model, he's got a big cloak. So I had the Inquisition symbol in the middle of the cloak, and then along the fringe, all along the cloak, was all of the different Space Marine chapters, just little like squares with their symbol in them. The idea being sort of like the Inquisition unites us or binds us or something like that, was kind of the idea behind it. If you dig, I don't think I have it on my Grill with a Brush site, but I've got a photo dump website that I use to throw all my photos in when I link them from forums. I've got pictures of him buried way deep in there. If you really want to go on a scavenger hunt, that's whpictures.blogspot.com. Go on a deep dive, see if you can find that model. One of the funny things I always think about, just your comment about the super shiny Space Marines. You know, they design all of these Space Marine chapters. And while I realize in the fluff, Space Marine power armor seems to be stronger than it is in the actual game for balance reasons. But you would still think that the basic tenets in warfare of camouflage and surprise and all of that stuff would be something that the Space Marines would care about. So the fact that their armor is often painted as super duper shiny and bright colors, also just, I don't know, it seems kind of silly. You would think that they would have their armor either painted to camouflage in whatever world they were about to go fight on, or they would have some kind of technology where the armor itself produces that color or matches, like a chameleon skin or something. I realize I'm being that guy right now where I'm quibbling about realism in a game that has almost no realism aspect to it, but there's I'm going to check on something. Hold on. There's a mourning dove that's for some reason just is really enjoying standing on our outdoor patio furniture and just making a whole bunch of noise, and my cat is just going ballistic over there. I'm just trying to make sure he's not hurting himself. Cats. Exactly. By the way, I didn't really have a plan for exactly what sections were going to be what color. I'm just kind of visually, as I go, I'm creating an idea, a sketch in my mind. So I started off with the brightest red color I knew I wanted to be prominent in the middle of the model. I thought about where else it might look to have good composition. Then I was thinking about the black. If you look at the bigger pictures of the armor, they almost always have the black, like way at the bottom, black boots, kind of black pants, sort of, the attention sinks away as you go further down the model. Then I'm kind of trying to figure out visually where to break it up with some of the darker red that will keep that going, but also create a little visual interest. So I'm kind of mentally planning everything out as I'm going. One thing I've seen people do that's pretty cool is they'll actually take a picture of their model and then they'll go on the computer and sort of color it in different ways. So they'll kind of do this ahead of time. That works too. I'm more of a fly by the seat of my pants kind of painter. I don't pre-plan a lot, except for sometimes like freehand designs and stuff. I'll do a lot of research and figure out what I like, but I'm not going to worry about being too perfect around the face. I need to paint it. No, I had no. I don't even know what Warhammer Fest is or what's going on. What did they show? New edition of Age of Sigmar? Wow. Cool. I don't find myself really that interested in what Games Workshop is doing, really. I realize that as I paint a Games Workshop model, but if somebody didn't hire me to do this, I wouldn't probably paint it. I don't know. There's just like really, I don't know. I've talked about this before. I dislike. So this model I like. Whatever they're doing here, keep this going, because this model has lots of flat surfaces, lots of places for me to have fun with. I don't like the fact that it's 140 pieces that takes me like a week and a half to assemble, but this is fun to paint. I don't like the direction GW has gone with like as soon as they went to their full 100% digital sculpting, their sculptors just kind of went, cool, I can use a copy and paste feature, or I can sculpt details that I don't have to sculpt by hand, or maybe that are too small to sculpt by hand and make it look good, and now I can make them look good. And they just covered every little tiny surface with obnoxious details. And to their credit, they're pushing the envelope of models. I mean, with the fact that they're doing hard plastic, things they can do in terms of balancing models, like that giant ghost carriage for the undead army, Nagash, the way he's floating, all really, really cool. I don't want to paint any of it. Way too many details. It's overly done. Now, again, to their credit, they're doing awesome models, and the way they teach people to paint, which is base coat, wash, pick out the highlights, actually makes those models look fantastic no matter what your skill of painting is. I know that I would be painting every little detail by hand, meticulously covering them in multiple coats, subtle things. It would take me 3 years to paint one of those big kits. I don't like them for myself. So I just pretty much tune out Games Workshop. But I do like these Primaris Marines. They've got much more flat surfaces on them. I like that. I feel like they restrained themselves some on it, but I look at some of the Deepkin models that I've seen people posting. Is that what they're called? Deepkin? I don't know. The elves from the underworld. Like that dude who's got the giant water cloak. I just look at that and I'm like, no, thank you. No interest whatsoever. The other thing is I think that their sculpting technique and their sort of design things that they follow. I think they work really well for armor, vehicles, stuff like that. But when it gets into organic models, the fact that they can't do undercuts, the fact that their organic shapes tend to get squared off a little bit, I just don't like the look of that. I like things that either were actually touched by a human hand during the sculpting process, or during the sculpting process they didn't have to feel constrained by the fact that they couldn't do undercuts. I just think it feels more natural. A lot of the Games Workshop models just feel cold and sterile to me. No matter how many cool details and things are on them, they just feel sterile. And so I just don't enjoy painting them that much. But again, I will say their Primaris Marines, that kind of update to the Space Marine look they did with those, really was a home run. They really did a great job. Yeah, those Dark Elf minis got some cool stuff going on there for sure. I will say they still don't really call to me, but I can totally understand where you'd be like all over like that. It's something new, it's something different you haven't seen. And that's another thing I'll give them credit for. With their idea of relaunching fantasy, while not super popular at the time, but they were trying to create they were trying to recreate their games to the point where they could control the IP, because they were told by the courts that they couldn't copyright things like dwarves and elves and stuff. So them trying to get creative and create new takes on things like elves and dwarves, and even their own things like the Khorne models and stuff. Again, I applaud them. They've done some really fantastic work, but there's just something about their organic models that I don't know, just don't like them, or things that are too overly detailed. But that's just me. Not meant to steal your thunder if that's what you're all about. I don't like to disparage what other people enjoy. That's not a good way to support the hobby. And my big thing is just paint what you like, If you enjoy painting it, that's the whole point of this thing. So yeah, I agree. Too much detail is bad. Too little detail is bad. There's definitely a sweet spot you get to where it's just the perfect amount of detail. And I think it'll vary a little bit for a painter. And I'll also say, just to repeat myself, but that's okay because we got time to fill. I really think that GW doesn't feel like they have to be constrained by issues of too much detail, because the style of painting that they teach people, the GW way, the heavy metal way, whatever, doesn't actually vastly increase your painting time when they put tons of detail on there. In fact, putting washes and stuff that pool around all of those details makes the model look better with less effort than if there was fewer details. You know, for most painters who are trying to get armies on the table, which is why their style is what it is. It's a style that helps you paint to a decent quality relatively quickly. And when you take models that are fantastic, like the ones they produce, you use their technique on that model, it's going to turn out fantastic. And that's why they have that design philosophy, I really think. But if you watch people like Ben Kometz or somebody who's awesome and they tackle one of those kits like a Magnus kit or a Greater Demon or something, you can follow their progress and they'll be painting that thing for like 6 months. I swear, it's just ridiculous how long it takes to paint those things to a display quality level. I would probably paint it even slower than that, although it wouldn't come out as good as theirs. I think we're finally getting somewhere.
It's kind of weird. This is, I think, the first Space Marine I've painted. Probably 10 years, at least. I don't really follow X-Wing very much. I tried it out when it first came out, and it was really fun for a month or two, and then I just got really bored of it. And of course, although I know there's lots of people doing repaints of X-Wings, and it wasn't really a big painting draw. The game was okay, but a lot of the games I was playing in were ending with one ship on each side, just chasing each other around the board. I don't know. I just got kind of bored. So I ended up selling off all my X-Wing models. But I have been sort of tangentially noticing a bunch of issues because they announced a new edition for that game. So there's a bunch of people sort of rage quitting or threatening to rage quit the game. Because for many of them, this might be their first miniatures game where they underwent an edition change. You know, I think a lot of the people think X-Wing brought a lot of board gamers into tabletop games, and so for them, you know, you get the board game, you play the board game, it never gets a second edition that you have to re-buy everything. So the fact there's this big edition change and they have to spend money to get new cards and things, there's people rage quitting, and it's interesting to see that. Something that I think a lot of us kind of are just used to and just take in stride when it happens. To the other games we play, I guess it's causing a big issue. I suspect there's maybe a little bit of that going on with Age of Sigmar too, just because there always is with an edition change where people get mad, and it's such a tricky thing. Without edition changes, the games get stagnant, and your player base will die off. With the edition change, you make people mad. They want to quit the game. There's no real win for that, although having periodically updated editions, I think, is about the only way to have long-term success. Yeah, it's funny. Shortly, my my niece and nephew, my brother-in-law, my wife's brother, huge Star Wars fan. He's kind of getting his kids now, who are like around 7 to 9 years old, getting them totally into Star Wars. And I'm kicking myself a little bit for selling all those X-Wing miniatures when I did, because now if I had them, I could have given them to those kids and they would have had pretty awesome little Star Wars toys. That bird has been entertaining Sancho for 2 hours.
Is that where he is? Is he nesting?
I don't really know what it's doing. It's just like strutting around on the chairs.
Looking down at Sancho
I-
and cooing at him.
I know. When I was over there, he was just staring at me and cooing. I don't know what he's doing.
Hello.
He really wants to come inside, I think. It's too hot out there.
Could you please turn on the mister?
We just had a full week of 100-degree temperatures here, so bird probably wants to come into the air conditioning.
That's so funny.
For my non-US listeners, about 40 degrees Celsius this week. And it's only May. All right, I think I'm pretty happy. Most of the sections I haven't painted yet. Oh, no, one more. Most of the sections I haven't painted yet, I'm going to do in that bronze color. And even some of the areas I've already painted, I'll do the bronze edging. I think that's going to turn out nice once it's all highlighted and shaded and glazed. I think that's a pretty good approximation of the Lannister color scheme, and 9 in Toronto. So let's see. That would be for like 80. No, that's not right. Double it, add 32 roughly. So 1850. It seems like a pretty nice day. I'd take that right about now. Well, Zach, anytime, seriously, anytime you want to come out for a little test drive, we'll make up the extra bedroom for you, take you to all the cool spots around town. We'll go swimming in the pool. You know, man, I'm telling you, paradise. Just pack your bags, you and your lovely wife, head on out. Hola, hola. What's up? All right, I'm going to work on his face. That way I can, as I do other colors, I can finish up the areas that are around there. Well, they don't really, we haven't been in the house much lately. Last year, about a year and a half ago, we got the house sealed, and so now it's just been kind of slowly getting rid of the ones that were probably in the attic and things like that. But yeah, they've been, and I've been doing my normal Xenos hunt, where I go out with my black light and my scorpion spray, and I feel like a space marine crawling through the space hulks, searching for these weird alien-looking creatures. But yeah, we've only seen one in the house in the last like 15 months, I think. So I think my plan is slowly working. Get the house sealed, be really vigilant out in the yard, keep them away from the house, and that seems to be doing the trick. Death Watch Brother Cat, exactly. My death toll is pretty high. Every time, I feel a little bad sometimes when I go out, just because, again, I mean, they are living creatures, but if they would just stay away from my house. But I go out into the green belt that's behind our house, and I try to help cull the population. So on the days when I go out and do that, my death toll can be pretty high. And yeah, I say that scorpions, tell their children and their things about the big boogeyman who comes. And anyway, I'll stop bringing up evoking genocide. All right, so face. That would be pretty awesome. I actually had an idea. So I don't know. I've shared a couple times. I don't know if you guys ever saw it. What the bark scorpions, which are what we have in Arizona, or at least in this part of Arizona, when you shine a black light on them, they glow this kind of neon yellow green color. You can Google it. Scorpion under a black light. Actually, I did this last week and it worked rather well. Just put my phone underneath the camera. So this is what they look like when you shine a black light on them. They're like, the color's a little off on the screen, but they're kind of this weird neon greenish yellow. And I was thinking it would be really interesting to do a diorama of like some Imperial Guard guys, and have Tyranids on the display, like on the board too, but paint it really, really dark, like it's supposed to be a night scene, and have the Imperial Guard guys with little flashlights, and then maybe like little cans of scorpion spray, or even just little blow torches, or even a flamethrower, whatever you want to do, and like have it so that the purplish black light is like shining where they're pointing their flashlights, and then have one of the Imperial Guards who has just turned enough to where the flashlight is catching the bottom leg of like a hive tyrant or something, and have just that part be glowing that neon green, and the look on his face like he just found something, but the other ones are looking for little scorpions and he found like a hive tyrant, would be kind of a crazy cool diorama if you could pull it off. Those buggers come straight from hell. Yep. They like to hide in little crevices too, so that's why it's really, you have to have the black light. If it wasn't for the black light, you'd never find them. They're perfectly camouflaged with the like desert colors, and then they'll wedge themselves in little cracks between the block walls, or like under a leaf or something. But you shine the light on there, and it's almost just like it glows. So you can find them really easily with the black light. But without the black light, you'd never see them. All the different areas of the country have to deal with their own pests, though, I'm sure. We don't really have like a big rat or mice problem in most of the areas of the valley. So I don't have to worry about giant rats getting into our house and things like that. So, we've all got our own pests. Also, while we have tons of birds living in our neighborhood, and you can, like I was just talking about them, you can totally hear them all the time. It's like a menagerie lives out in the greenbelt behind us. Knock on wood, we don't have too many pigeons in this area. Sorry, this is a relatively new brush, and there's been this couple long stray hairs that have been getting me. I think, just by luck, a couple of them were isolated. Looks better. Yeah, to get back to the weather and temperature thing, if you've never been to Arizona, you want to compare it to the kind of heat you get in some other parts where there's a lot higher humidity. So summer in places like Virginia, I imagine. I know it was like this back in the Midwest, Indiana, where I'm originally from. Summer there feels a little bit like a sauna. Hot, very humid. You just kind of just sweat immediately. Whereas Arizona is more like your oven. So when you open up your oven door and you get that blast of just really hot, dry air that just comes right out of your oven, that's what summer in Arizona feels like. Doesn't feel like a sauna, it feels like an oven. So you kind of have to decide whether you want to be walking around, which feeling you want to be walking around with. Slightly higher temperatures, but very dry. You sweat, but the sweat dries basically immediately on you, which is why people get dehydrated really easily here. They don't realize how much they're sweating because they don't get all damp. It evaporates immediately. Or walk around with a little bit lower temperatures, but you're just drenched all the time. I'm going to use my technique from my eye tutorial that I did. These eyes are way too small to do more advanced stuff with, so that's interesting. So just glob some white paint into his eye socket. Not worrying about being too fine. I'm also going to take some of this very dark, this red that I have. Add just the slightest touch of black. Use this to paint his inside of his mouth. Got a little watery on me. That's okay. Do a couple coats of that. Come back with the black. We're just going to paint some vertical bars for his eyes. Looks pretty terrible at the moment, but we'll fix it. I'll use this dark red that I've got. Yeah, I'm just going to use some of this in his mouth too. And I'll outline the eye. And the nice thing about this technique is that you're really always kind of painting the negative space. You're not trying to paint the actual eye inside of something else, you're always just painting away from where the eye is. And you don't have to be as neat this way. You can also really easily create effects where the model can be looking off to the side, or different things like that more easily this way than with dotting. And we'll go back up and touch up around those areas. You can do this before you paint any of the skin. I kind of like to usually get at least the base coat of the skin down before I do this. I don't know why, but my other video shows it with before you paint any of the skin, I believe, which works just fine. I just find that when I usually do it myself, like for real, I usually do the base coat first. And we've got some teeth. You know, one thing that's always a little tricky is, you know, making the teeth so they don't look like too white. You can use an off-white color. You could also even sometimes use one of your highlight flesh colors so that it doesn't stand out too much. I'll just use this slightly ivory color. I suppose I could turn this off for a minute. I'm just kind of tapping the teeth. Let's just use like using little dots. Just give the suggestion of some teeth there. I'll use this slightly lighter red that I had and just tap his tongue real, just one little dot there. Give it a little bit of color. And meanwhile, also touch the face. This is why you want to do all of this work before you paint the face on really small models like this. And just in general, it's an example of working from the deepest parts of the model out to avoid or minimize the times that you get paint where you don't want it. So there we go. Pretty decent start to the face. Those vertical bars could have been a little bigger. Looks a little starey at the moment. I'm going to try to touch that up. That's better. All right, start doing some highlighting on the flesh. All right, so we got some basic flesh there. I really like this mix where I use basic flesh mixed with a little bit of golden skin, a little bit of light skin. This is kind of my go-to highlight color. Or first highlight color, I should say. This is what I used in all my dwarf tutorials. In fact, I think for all of those dwarves I used this. The way I varied their skin tones a little bit at the end was mixing up different colors for the glazing and shading process. So I'm just going to start sketching out the highlight spots on the model. One of the things I'm going to do is leave the face on the right with a little less this highlighting. Just keep it a little darker. Do a second pass with the same color, help make that a smooth layer. Crazy cat. So one thing I find when I work with paint wells like this rather than wet palettes are really easy. Grab a little bit of paint you want when you mix your next layers in. The paint wells, you end up with this kind of deep well of paint. And if you try to add paint to it to lighten it, you can find that you have to add a lot of paint. You end up wasting quite a bit. So one thing you'll see me do from time to time is one of two things. Either grab a little bit of paint out of here to start a new well so we have less paint to work with, or you can always just take some of the paint out, which allows you to add less of your next color to achieve the effect you're looking for. All right, so once I've got that done, I'll start adding pale skin. And just keep doing the same thing. Leave a little bit of, as you do this, try to leave a little bit of the previous color we just painted. So when we were out in DC a couple weeks ago, and Zach and his wife took myself and my wife out to Doi Moi, which is this really amazing Asian restaurant in DC. We had a great time, ate way too much, had so much fun. My wife and I also went to this other restaurant while we were there called Church Key or Church Keys, something like that, which is kind of a bar bar restaurant. And they had a huge beer list, like lots of taps there. And they had 4 beers that were on tap that were these Maryland specials that they're kind of like an experimental thing that they're trying to do is kind of a combination of some local college or university and brewers in the area. They're trying to make these Maryland only beers. So they're made with Maryland hops. They're made with grain that's grown in Maryland. Like everything is from Maryland. And there were 4 of them, all kind of variations of pale ale / IPA. And I was asking the waitress, like, oh, which of these do you recommend? I really want to try one of them since, I'm from Arizona. I can't get this kind of stuff anywhere else. So I'd like to try one of them. And she just looks at me and goes, none of them. I don't recommend any of them. It's like, what? She's like, yeah, they didn't really, they're still experimenting. They didn't really turn out great this year. It's like, oh, well, can I at least, get some tasters of them? She's like, oh, I guess. I'm also going to bring you some other stuff because I don't think you're going to like them. It's kind of a funny experience. I appreciated her honesty, but they were very prominently featured on the menu. So she gave me 2 tasters of 2 of them, and then like a Bell's Double Heart IPA, which I've had before, but that was one I said, well, I know that beer, I'm fine with that. And then she gave me like 2 that she thought were sort of similar to Bell's to try also. And I tasted one of the Maryland beers, and it was like, yep, that is not good. And the other one was actually not, it was okay. I mean, it wasn't one of those where I tasted it and said, please ship a case to me in Arizona. But it was okay. And I ended up, just for the sake of it, just for the fact that you literally can't get this beer anywhere else, I went ahead and had a pint of that. Maybe even 2, I don't remember. But yeah, they weren't as bad as she was making them out to be, although they definitely weren't, I'm sure they weren't the best beers on their tap. I'm always big into trying things, go to some new brewery or something. I'm always trying things. I've even tried to get into sours. I know they're the big thing now. Everybody, all the microbreweries were all into IPAs for a long time there, and a lot of them kind of feel like they pushed IPA maybe as far as they can push it, and so now sours are all the rage. And I don't know, I have not been able to get into sours yet. And everywhere I go, I try, I make a point of, yep, let me try it, give me a taster, and just figuring I just need to acclimate to it, and eventually I'll like them if I've tasted it enough. But it hasn't happened yet. Sours for me may end up like coffee beer. I love coffee. I love beer. I do not want my beer to taste like coffee. So no matter how many I've tried, I just don't like them at all. Sours might end up being that way for me. I like the idea. I like sour things. I like beer, but maybe the 2 of them combined is just not for me. It's been kind of cool. Arizona, the Phoenix area where I live, I'm probably like a lot of places in the country, but the last 15 years or so, really been this kind of microbrewery explosion here. We're a little bit spoiled for choice now with really good local stuff, which is nice. And here in Arizona, we don't, I know in some places, I know Colorado at least used to be this way. I don't know if it still is, but there were different licenses if you wanted to serve food in addition to serving beer. So a lot of the microbreweries just serve beer, and then they have food trucks or something to bring food in, or they just don't serve food. They have snacks, like bags of chips or something. But in Arizona, there is no difference for that. So then a lot of these microbreweries all start off with restaurants attached to help them make money as they start. And of course, being able to serve all their own beer at their restaurant, they get a much bigger profit margin on that. So that's one of their ways they make a lot of money. And so they focus on not just having a restaurant attached, but really like gourmet pub food. It's kind of become the norm with a lot of these local microbreweries. I would say that I don't think the sour craze has hit Arizona maybe as much as it has some other places. I think partly because, like I said, that we have tons of these really small scale microbreweries around. And making a sour, one of the problems with making a sour is once you put whatever kind of yeast or stuff in there that makes the sour flavor, once you put that in one of your tanks, you can't ever brew anything else but sours in there. Because no matter how well you clean it out, some of that little bacteria or whatever survives, and it just turns whatever else you try to brew in that tank sour later. So once you've got tanks that are dedicated to sour, you have to really protect that tank. There's also could be cross-contamination with, if anything gets cross-contaminated anywhere else in your brewery, that tank could go sour on you too. And so I know that there's some issues with that, if you're small enough, you just don't want to mess around with. Or can't devote the brewing space to tanks that can only brew sours. So I don't think they've completely taken over here like they have some other places. A lot of them have maybe one on tap, and those are kind of one of the things too, where they'll sometimes bring in stuff from other breweries to cover their sour base. But my favorite brewery around here is Santan Brewery, and I don't think they have any sours on tap of their own, just really good other stuff. Today's stream is brought to you by beer. Let's talk about beer for an hour while we're painting. So I looked at the clock. I've been streaming for 2 hours, but you don't have to feel like you have to be here the whole time. I'm probably just going to leave the camera on for a while because we have a family thing in a little while, but I'm just going to be painting up until then anyway. So I might as well just leave it on and so if you want to keep hanging out with me, be my guest. Also, I understand if you got to go. Maybe I'll leave it on at least as long as it takes to finish the head, so you can see all that process from start to finish, and then maybe I'll shut the camera off. cool. Thanks, Tancred. Thanks for watching, man. That was not meant to assume anything. Sorry. Thank you for watching. All right, so just to kind of show you. So this is where I'm at with the face right now. I might do one more coat on the top of his head to get a nice smooth layer with the pale flesh color. The next step is going to be to glaze over the skin. And that'll start to unite the different layers, establish our shadows, kill the really stark, undead flesh we've got going on here. You can peek unless you're trying to unless you want to save it like till Christmas. So this model is for Pact Team. So this is where we're at right now. I'm working on the colors on this guy just in case I want to change anything up. It's easier to fix it on the small model. So I've blocked out the colors for the more wine burgundy color, the slightly brighter red, the black areas. The stuff I haven't, that's kind of a brownish color right now. That's going to be where we get that bronze brass finish. I was using, so I've got the reference picture up to give kind of an idea about how things are going to look. And yeah, working on the face right now. We've got all the highlights done, so it looks very bright and undead right now. We're about to knock all that down with some glazing. So my favorite flesh tone, I use on several of the dwarves, the more reddish flesh tone, comes from, thanks Pact Team. I'm glad you're liking it. You're going to like it even more when it's actually highlighted and shaded. You know, the base colors are not super exciting. But so what I like is I take this color by Scale 75 called Pink Flesh. I use this for my glazing and initial shading. However, it makes a fairly reddish toned skin. And while this guy has a lot of red on him, I think I'm going to try to neutralize it just a hair. Maybe make it not quite so red. So just mix a little bit of the basic flesh into it. Basic flesh is a very muted color. It might even, if you look at it, might even have a touch of green in it, which will help counter a little bit of the red that's in the pink flesh. What I'm looking for is something that is somewhat similar to the base coat in terms of kind of like a darkness level, but with maybe a little bit more color is usually what I look for this first pass, which is why the pink flesh is really good. But I'm going to mix a little bit of that basic flesh in. That should be good. And I'm going to mix up a glaze. So this is going to get really thin. I'm warning you, Pact Team. I'm going to do a lot of freehand on this model, so just fair warning. Yeah, I'll give you a color recipe for everything I did. I can kind of give you an idea right now just what the base coats are at least. I used P3's Sanguine base that's like the wine burgundy base color I'm using. I used deep red. This is for the brighter red areas for the base color. And the other is just black. I haven't totally decided what I'm going to do for the base coat of the bronze things. I'm thinking it might be Gobi brown. I haven't fully decided, but I think that might be the base coat for those areas. All right, so this is where I like to joke that, okay, now paint over everything you just painted. It's always funny to me how you just spend all this time meticulously painting an area and then you just coat it, the entire area, with paint. It just always makes me laugh a little bit. So hopefully you can see even with just one pass, it's starting to knock down that color a little bit, start to unite the different layers. And if you have this paint thin enough, each layer you do is going to be so subtle that you just keep going until you're happy. You don't really have to worry about going too far.
I don't know. You want a tattoo on his face? That's gonna be the only. That's the only place I could do tattoos on the model. What would you like? Do you just want some like Mike Tyson type tattoos around his eyes? Do you want something like going all the way up his skull? Something skull. You mean like an actual skull on his, or something that covers like his whole bare head? I mean, something this small, it's easy to do like just little designs, like, you know, little, like just kind of designs that can go over his whole skull. Doing actual like, oh, let's paint a skull on the side of his head, that becomes kind of difficult to do with shading and realistic and stuff like that. But no, I didn't mean to give you ideas. This is going to be a really small space to paint a realistic looking skull. It can go really wrong on this side. Something with, yeah, it's going to be way easier to just do some cool freehand designs. Couple reasons just to fully complete the thought. So not only is it a really small space, which makes it tough to do icons like skulls and things that are really accurate, but the other problem you're going to run into is because his head is curved, so you're working on a small space that's round. And so to transfer a design onto a round shape is really tricky. And again, especially at this size. So that would be the work of a weekend. So I can definitely give you some cool like tribal type designs and things.
what I mixed up for the color here. I mixed Ryla Gray, which is my favorite tattoo color, and then threw a little bit of Despair Green into it, which is kind of a new little recipe I've been working on, and I like it. It darkens it just a hair and gives it just a little bit more of that greenish color that you tend to get when a tattoo starts to fade a little bit, a really dark tattoo. I don't think I moved the zoom back, did I? So start with kind of a design that goes around his eye a little bit. And then we'll work our way down his skull. All right, see you later, Pack Team. One thing I find when I'm painting things like this is I need to remind myself to breathe.
There you go, an on the fly skull sleeve or whatever you want to call it. Some tattoos. It's kind of channeling a little bit of a like technical feel, like a circuit board kind of design. I don't know, that's what was in my head as I was painting that. Since he's piloting a dreadnought, maybe those tattoos are actually somehow conductive. Something about how he's wired into the machine. Anyway, that was what was in my head. All right, back to glazing. Just a little diversion there. One of the things that often strikes me is, funny is not quite the right word, but just strikes me when I do projects like this, that although I realize that not everybody has the same steady hand that I do, or the same practice with doing little tattoo designs and freehand designs like that. You know, I could spend conservatively, 8 to 15 hours at least on just this guy. Probably closer to the 15 by the time he's done. And at the end of it, he'll be completely done. And what people are going to talk about is they'll be like, oh my gosh, how did you do those tattoos? And that will be what draws their attention. And you saw that that was what, the work of 20 minutes max. So relatively speaking, it's almost the biggest bang for my buck in terms of painting models for the time commitment compared to the wow factor for people. Gonna go one more pass on this and then start to. Well, I might do a couple more passes because try to sink that tattoo in a little bit. You should be able to start to see how the glazing starts to bring those layers that we built up all together. It kind of starts to like meld everything together. Nice, man. Is that which one are you doing? Is that like owl sorcerer that you were painting?
All right, so we're going to darken this up. So another thing, so I use this Indian shadow a lot to start shading. The Indian shadow is nice. It creates a nice red undertone. So if you're doing like the red tinted skin, I think I'm going to try using African shadow instead, which is a little cooler color, a little more purple. So one thing to keep in mind is this is a glaze we have mixed up here, which means it's mostly water. There's not a lot of paint, not a lot of pigment in this. And because of that, if you add just a little pigment, it's going to drastically change the color of the mixture. Because by percentage-wise, it's actually a pretty significant percentage of the color that's in there. So you always want to be careful when you're adding paint to your glaze. I would suggest not adding directly in, like kind of do what I do, drop off a little bit to the side and then add just a little bit in with your mixing brush at a time. All right, so for this, I'm going to start to focus on the shadow areas. So I'm not going to necessarily go over the entire face like I was. And move the brush stroke in the direction of the shadows as much as you can. Sometimes it's a little tough with different angles you have to get into, but as much as you can. What time do we have to leave?
2:45. 2:50. About an hour.
After a couple passes of that, I'm going to add a little bit more of our shadow color in there. Downshift my brush a little bit because it's starting to get tight quarters in here. And I'm going to do one more. I'm going to make it much darker this time to really hit the extreme shadow areas. So I'm going to add much more of that paint. Not too worried about being dark this time. Keep it really thin. All right, the very, very final step. I'm going to go back to the pale flesh, which was our final highlight color. And keeping it really thin. I'm just going to go back and reestablish a few of the highest points. I'm going to focus on that more on the left side of the face because I want to keep the right side of that face more shadowed. And there we go. I just realized there's one more thing I want to do on it. And that is, he's got a scar on his left eye. So I'm going to use some of this Indian Indian shadow will be fine, maybe. Maybe add just a little extra red to help give it just a little more red color. But keep the glaze thin, because we just want to tint the scar. We do not want to make it look bloody. And just do a couple passes on that till you're happy. One angry space marine. So there you go. I'll probably stop for now. The next thing, once I get back to working on him, I'll probably start working on the brightest red areas and start doing the highlighting and the shadowing on those areas, and then go from there. But thanks for joining me today. Again, a couple things to remind you of. If you want to take part in the paint along of the Celtic busts, head to my website. I lowered the price on them, so it makes it a little bit easier to afford. So GorillaWithABrush.com, go to the Celtic busts page, pre-order those, or order those, get them in before we do the start the paint along. It'll start, I'm going to guess about 2 weeks from now is when I'll start that. One of the things I want to do in the meantime is I want to do a video that just talks a little bit about prepping the miniatures so that everybody can get them prepped and ready to go prior to the first day of painting. So it might depend on how quickly I get that video, because once I post that, then I'll want to give people a good week or two to get their models ready. But again, if you want to get in on that, please order those. Again, it helps me, and it also helps charity as well. If you are interested in dice bags, so I'll show you a picture of that. So there's only about roughly 4 of these that have not been spoken for already. So if you are interested in one of them, they're going fast. And again, 100% of what you pay for those goes to charity. I don't keep any of the money. So if you want to support charity, you want an awesome dice bag, you want to subtly advertise for me when you go to your game nights, it would be awesome. Again, a little bit of detail on that. They have pockets sewn into the insides of them, so you can keep dice sorted if you have different types of dice. They also are cool for, you can put tokens in there as well as dice. Or if you play RPGs, you can use the pockets for dice. You can throw your mini into the middle of the bag and it won't get banged around with the dice. Just lots of different cool things you can do with those. So yeah, so thanks for joining me. I look forward to seeing you on my next stream. If you don't already follow me, Twitter, Facebook, please do. I always love to interact with people on there. It's one of my big social outlets, so especially Twitter. Twitter is my preferred of those.
Ghost Section 9, thanks for stopping by. Blues Light, thank you. Tan Creed, Packed Team, and any of you guys who were just, Ola popped in. Anybody who has just been lurking, I still appreciate you being here, and it motivates me to get on stream here and share my work with you guys. It keeps me going as well. So again, thank you, and have a wonderful week. Have a happy Mother's Day tomorrow, and I'll see you next time.